Hi there, everyone. Happy end of November. We have a rule in our house, sort of, that Christmas decorations don't go up until December. But guess what? It's going to be December later this week, I think. So I'm getting excited. I'm seeing everybody having their lights out and decorations up. It's looking really festive. So today I'm going to be sewing some blocks for Oak Grove Square. I'm going to give it just a few minutes to let people sign on. And I did realize that I need to wind a new bobbin. So I'm going to do that for a second just to have a backup one ready to go. If I've got an empty one here. Got some that are really close. I think I can, you know what, if I run out, I'm going to use this light color. It's going to work. Okay. All right. So I'm going to be all right with that. So on Oak Grove Square, we are on the ABC, the C background. My C background is the pink grapefruit because I'm making a thatched version. And my thatched version has a lot of kind of the natural colors. And then the background is getting darker as it's going out. So I am working on that. We're going to be doing oak leaves and doing the little leaf stems. So let's go ahead and just start with the oak leaves. I start by doing all of my little stems first, putting those aside and having those ready. And then for the oak leaves, we're going to be making this oak leaf here. The important thing that I am thinking about when I'm making this block is that I have two different fabrics. And so I want to make sure when I'm doing my angles on the sides of the leaves that I have it lined up with what's in the center so that these are matching. Also, this is the time if I have any directional fabrics that I am sewing with, I'm probably going to lay these all out on the floor so that I can decide which direction I want all those pieces to go before I sew them. I'm using thatch, so it's a little bit easier for me. And when I use non-directional, it's a little bit easier. But this is the point when I would lay it out on the floor if I was using directional fabrics. So for this particular block, the first thing I'm doing, well, I make the stem, so I just have those ready to go. I make the center piece. I sew my two long strips together. And then we're going to add the top of the piece to make this pointed top. And for this, I add, just like on a flying geese unit, I'm putting on one side first, then I am pressing it open, and I'm then adding on the second piece and making sure that I pressed it open first. Now, when I press to start this, I press the back open on the seam as opposed to the side. And the reason, and so when I'm going here, you can see that I'm sewing right over that seam because I'm going corner to corner. And so I'm going over the seam. What I like is when this finishes up, both of my seams are going over the open seam in the back. So then this makes it lay real flat. So I have a lot less bulk that I have to deal with up at the corner. When I press this open, then I sew, press out, sew, press out. I get a much flatter result by doing it that way. So that's why I always sew this middle seam here. So I'm going to make this piece. So like on here, I've already got my first one side on. I'm going to add the other one on. You can draw a line on the back of the piece. This is small enough. I don't need to do that. And I do use the diagonal seam tape from Cluck Cluck Sew that I have down on my sewing machine. I'm going to just bend this down a little bit. So when I am sewing, I'm just lining up on the red middle line. I'm going to the middle point and I can sew across and I don't have to mark any lines. So I use the diagonal seam tape a lot when I am doing this. I also tend to do a lot of chain piecing. So as I'm doing these, I tend to always put the same side on first, the same side on second, and I just keep chain piecing them into a long strip that I'm then cutting apart afterwards. So in here, these are also small enough that I just give it a trim with my scissors. Take that to the iron, going to press it open. All right, so I've got my center. The next thing is then working on the sides of this. So on my sides, I'm going to have it's hard for you to see because my colors are fairly light, but I'm having the wash linen on one side and I'm having the buttermilk on the other. So as I'm doing this, what I want to do is really pay attention to this angle that is happening on the leaf at the bottom, because I want to make sure that I don't have a buttermilk one going this way and a linen one going that way when I want them flipped. So it's okay if you want a scrappier look to do that, but I am wanting mine to match up because I like more the look of like, light hitting one side, shaded on the other. So for this, because I'm going in different directions, I like to have one that is my reference point. So I'm going to sew one of these pieces on the buttermilk, one of these pieces on the linen. I have a little line that I've drawn on them. And so as I'm sewing, I'm going to keep this right here by the sewing machines that I make sure I'm always putting the right angle on the right one. If I don't do it that way, then I would go ahead and sew one first, press it, leave this on my sewing machine as a sample as I'm adding the top pieces. If I don't need to differentiate between the fabrics that much, I can also just go ahead and sew all these pieces on at once, sewing on my top pieces, the stitch and flip, and the bottom. Again, I just have to make sure that my bottom is going in the right angle. And again, this is why I like using the diagonal seam tape, because I don't have to draw all those lines. Now, for this particular project, because my colors were close together, I decided to add all of my top pieces first, so kind of like little kitty ears. So I put in all my top pieces first for both of the colors. So these are sewn on this way with it going one way and another. Then I press them open. Now it's really easy for me to see what color the fabric is. I can line them up right next to the template and go ahead and get my, let's see, my 2.5 inch pieces that go on the bottom. And I know that this piece is going to go this direction. So I will do all of one color at a time. So I'm going to line it up. I want it to be this angle. So I just double check it. And I'm just going to chain piece all of the washed linen color going in the same direction. After I've done all the linen ones, then I'm going to move over to my buttermilk, and I'm going to do the same thing with the buttermilk. I'm putting my square on the bottom. I'm going to look at my sample and see which direction. This time I'm going this direction. And I'm going to chain piece and do all of them. If I do it one color at a time, I am less likely to make mistakes. When I do a mix of the colors, I'm more likely to make mistakes on my angles. I do like to make one block first, just one, to make sure that everything is lining up the way that I think, that I've cut things the right size, and all of that stuff is good. I make one, and then I do assembly line on the rest of the pieces. Now, on these two blocks, you're using a lot of the 1.25 inch little squares. When it comes to cutting all these pieces, this is the time when if I'm using my background strips, this was from a different background, I'm going to put a couple of my strips down because like on some of these you need, a lot. And I'm going to be using the Stripology ruler to go through with multiple ones. I can cut a whole bunch at one time. That works fine when it is the 1.5 inches. When it is in 1/4 inches, then I am using this newer Stripology that goes to the 1/4 inch. And is a big time saver. It really, really makes a big difference, especially when I can, put a couple of these here. If I need to, I put a piece of tape so that I know exactly which lines I'm using. I figure out my math on it. And then I can just cut like a bunch of strips all at once. And it's a lot more efficient for cutting all those little squares. So I'm going to do all of my pieces like this. I am working on it with the little kitty ears first, right? So this is the same thing. It's just I hadn't opened it up yet. And then these are small enough that I can just trim them with my scissor. And then I'm going to go press that open. And I'm going to finish up all the sides of the oak leaves. So once I've got all of my sides of the oak leaves, you are putting them together, 2 of them together with a background piece at the top, and you're doing it for the 2 sides. Here's my other one. Right, and these are going to each side of your middle piece of the leaf. The nice thing about this, you are not having to match any points. This is just going to the side of the leaf, and the side of the leaf, there's no points on the blocks that need to match. And then at the end, I'm adding my stem. For the pressing on this, I tried this both ways. I tried it where I have pressed the seam open, where I've joined it to the center, and I did it where I pressed it to the side. I think that pressing it into the middle at this point is a little bit better for me. And it might be different for you, but it seems to be laying a little bit flatter to me. I'm getting a little bit of a bump here from this seam on the corner in the back. So I like actually pressing this in. A lot of times with pressing, I'll take like my first one, I'll try pressing it different ways to see which way things lay flatter. So that is going to be your oak leaf. All right, I think making the oak leaves is really fun. They're one of my favorite leaves in this project. So the next leaf that we're going to do is the little leaf stalk. And so for the leaf stalk, that is going to finish up like this. When I am making my leaf stalk, I'm usually arranging my pieces again so that I'm thinking of my lighter piece on the top, my darker piece on the bottom. I'm almost thinking of sunlight coming down and that being, shadow and light. You can flip them around and have them however you like. I tend to just like the order and the symmetry on this. I'm making all of my blocks this way, and then on the other side it's going to flip. So it's actually going to be very balanced looking because now this is going to have the darker color on the top. And so it'll be a completely even assortment going around the sides of what is dark and what is light. So for this, the directions are written so that you make half square triangles using the 8 at a time method. So you're using a little bit bigger square, and you are sewing what would be the equivalent of this. You are sewing across this way. You're drawing a line, or you're using seam tape. On a bigger piece like this, I would draw a line. You are sewing to each side of the line, and then each side of the line going this way, and then you're going to be cutting it in half and in half, and then on the angle, so that you're going to get 8 half square triangles out of one of these. Now, then you have to trim it. And if I'm doing it the traditional way and I'm trimming it, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my pieces, which are a little bit bigger, and I'm going to use my rotating mat. I'm going to put my half square triangle down, and I'm either going to use a little ruler that is exactly 2.5 inches so that I can put it on and I can just move this around and never take my finger off and trim it up. Or I am going to use the other tool that I like a lot, which is the block ruler. And again, I have these in an assortment of sizes, but I don't know where my 2.5 is. On this one, so with my half square triangles, I always press the half square triangles to a side. And the reason that I do that is because it gives me the option to use the block ruler. I try to press towards the darker side of the two fabrics. And when I put the block ruler on, it has this groove, which is going to go up against the side that you press the seam to. So it kind of latches in there. And then you can slide this back and forth. And so I could trim, move this around and trim. And again, I can just do it on a little rotating mat. I never have to take my fingers off of the ruler. On this, I would just slide it, or I would get one that is that size. So that's what I would do for my trimming up. And that seems to be the most efficient for me. But since this was the 8 at a time method, and I have triangles on a roll for the half square triangles, I'm going to save myself a lot of time and use my triangle paper. And that way I don't have to trim up my blocks. My blocks are already going to be sized to the size I need, because the actual size is it's like 1/8 of an inch under what the more traditional method is. And so when you cut this, it's going to line up exactly. The one piece of advice I would have if you're using the triangles on a roll is double check. And I say it from experience that before you sew, you have right sides together, because I have made a whole bunch of triangles where I had one of the fabrics placed the wrong way. So you want to make sure you've got your right sides together, which I do now. And if you look at the cutting instructions has the 6-inch square going across. The triangles on a roll that I'm using is also making that same size. So you don't need to change anything on your cutting directions to use the triangles on a roll. There are other triangle papers too. Lisa Bonjean of Primitive Gatherings makes a really good triangle paper as well. And you can cut up the papers to however you want them to lay out. I do like getting these triangle on a roll or ones that are already printed onto paper, because they're lighter weight paper. And I got some where it was a download and I printed them out. It's a much heavier paper to rip, and so it's harder. These rip much more easily, and so they're much nicer to use. I thought I had my roll here. Oh, here we go. So here's my roll. I actually bought from Fat Quarter Shop a box that has like the most used sizes. So it's got like the finished size 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 5. It goes up, and there's probably about maybe 8 or 9 rolls in there. And so I use them a lot. You can also buy these individually. But I think they're really, really handy. So what I'm going to do, and I've done these where I've sewn a whole long piece. I find it's really hard to navigate it being really long. So for me, the sweet spot is to cut about 6 of these, or 3 rows going across. It's going to depend on the size of your triangles. Smaller ones you could get more on, but I want to think about what I can maneuver comfortably underneath. Oh, see, it doesn't matter because I'm going to cut that off. I actually cut 4, but it's fine. I'm going to cut that and it'll be reused. So with the triangles on a roll, you're going to be cutting where it's a straight line, and you sew on the dashed lines. They have little arrows to show you what direction to go. I don't think the arrows matter, but they're helpful. Another tip for using triangle paper is, just like foundation paper piecing, shorten your stitch length a little bit. Shorter stitches are going to have less likelihood of pulling apart more when you rip the paper off. The paper will rip off more easily because all those little holes are closer together. Actually, this is the one where I'm going to go off. So I'm going to go ahead and just stop this one right here. So because I was chain piecing, I have a little piece on here. As you can see, there's a couple things that are sewn on there. After I just sew the first one, I think it's a good idea to just open up and check, make sure you've got your right sides together. So I would go through and I would be sewing all the dashed lines on this together. Then I'm going to be trimming these down. And so to trim them down, I am going to cut off the outer perimeter first. This is a bigger ruler that I didn't know was underneath some stuff and I ended up breaking it, but I still keep using it because it's such a good size. It's still a good ruler. All right, so here you can cut them apart however you like. I just sort of go around and I cut off my corners first. And I always find it easier to cut these with the rotary cutter versus scissors, just so that I have a little more accuracy on them. And then I'm going to cut this in half. The nice thing is, if it's not lined up perfectly, it doesn't matter because you're really just cutting on the lines. You don't have to worry if that, shifts. So now that I've trimmed those, I'm going to be taking off the paper. I just give it a rip and tear it fast and pull that little thing off. And then here's my half square triangle. I'm going to go press this, and this is exactly the size that I need, the 2.5 for a finished 2-inch triangle. So what you're going to look for is what size is the finished triangle going to be on here. You're going to look in your instructions. You want it to, you're trimming it to 2.5 inches, but it is 2 inches finished when it is sewn into the quilt. That's the size that you're going to be looking for. So using the triangle paper saves me all of the trimming them to size afterwards. And I also find it's a lot faster for me on the sewing to just do a stretch of like 6 of these, follow the dashed lines. I think it's a really big time saver. So I like those a lot. Once I have my triangle, then I'm going to just take my little scissors, and if I trimmed it up the traditional way, I would have already cut those little dog ears off, but I didn't. So I'm going to cut those off. And at this point, I'm going to be adding my corners. That's not the size I need. I just went down and cut more of this size too, and I don't know where it is. So I'm just going to show you with this. So I'm going to be putting a corner on each side. Make sure you are not sewing over the seam. You want to be sewing over the side that has no seam, and you're going to go side to side so that you get this on the 2 corners. This then gets trimmed off, right? And you're going to press that open so that you have a piece like this. So this is going to be your little leaf. And whatever way you decide, you're going to make all the leaves like this, and then you're going to decide your positioning later, once you're rotating it in space. So I look at how my stuff is arranged here, and I'm going to have 3 of them in a row. And like I said, I like to have my 3 with the light and darks. I like my leaves going the same direction, and I like the light and dark the same. But you can have your leaves go different directions. You can switch around. You can make a scrappier look, whatever you like. So I guess I'm just a little more rigid than I thought, but I like them all lined up. So I do one on the top, one on the bottom. I did it here with the lights. It gets sewn to each side of the stem, and I also press it in towards the stem on the back. That seems to lay the best for my leaf stalk. So that is the leaf stalk, and we are making, I think, 8 of the leaf stalk and 8 of the oak leaves. I hope you have a good time with them. And I've really been enjoying seeing what people have been posting, their progress on things. It's just really great to see. So, and it's not too late to join in, because a lot of people will just go ahead and finish their quilt and they are moving on to another project. I'm sewing at a pace where I have a lot of other projects going on at the same time. So I decided this is how many blocks I can do each month. I will do this group, and then I'm spreading it out over the year more. You can sew however you like. But if you want to sew along with me, I'm just doing it monthly, and there's plenty of time to catch up. So I'm wondering if there are any questions on things. I don't know if I can see it on here. I did want to share my progress on leaf press. This is leaf press done in my Christmas colors and thatched. And I have a question for you, which is, I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do on the border for this. I can either do like a thin green line and a red border going around, make it all red, or do a white border going around, which is what I had first envisioned. And I'm really not sure which one I would like better at this point. And so I think I'm going to open it up on Instagram to some voting and see what people think would be better. So all I have left to do is the sashing. The rest of this is done. So this is going to be part of this year's decorations at the house, along with my quilts made with the new Winterly fabric. So I get to enjoy a little bit of that. So thank you so much for tuning in today. And I just appreciate people sewing along. And please feel free to contact me either on this video or in the Facebook group, Robin Pickens Sew Happy Community, if you have any questions about things. And I also hope that you will post your pictures of your projects there. Thank you.